We continue with the discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, for being very patient. They're passing notes right now, and I believe they're complaining that I've kept them in the studio for too long, but thank you for your patience. Gentlemen, some of the first misgivings that you had as we were doing the wall-to-wall coverage, excited that we are having the first few photos and pictures. As a foreign affairs editor and correspondent, what do you reflect on this?
I reflected perhaps in the media's desire to be fast with the news. They could have inadvertently played into the terrorist hands.
How so?
Good. I think in a situation like what we had at Westgate, so many things are going on simultaneously. And one of the key things is information, and is how you manage that. And also to be aware of what your responsibilities are as journalists. Indeed, you have to be very careful you don't play into their hands by perhaps propagating or inciting.
In this case, did we?
You were almost there.
Why do you laugh, Dennis? Why do you laugh, Dennis?
I think is I mean he said that with a polite apology.
Right. What's the impolite and true?
I mean the thing is this, one of the things that I mean, first of all, what it is I have to say about the coverage of terrorism is that the media has to avoid it being infotainment. And infotainment is basically where, you know, like, I mean, basically what HBO does, it becomes an infotainment where you have these large coverage, interested viewers and all that. There's drama, there's blood, there's heroes, there are victims and all that. And it becomes a movie of sorts. But what it is that you're doing is that basically there's physical and mental pain that people went through. It's really not a good thing to see.
But you
otherwise,
comment on us playing into the...
Yeah, one of the things I want to say is that it's the aspect of, I think what it is that he's alluding to is agenda setting. Which is a key thing, and framing. So there were things that were obviously, the aspect of agenda setting and framing is that there are key things that you overplay, and then it becomes that's a key thing, and it probably wasn't.
And I think that's why I have a problem, because I was there covering the event, and you know, we're in the business of telling stories. That's what we do every day, and telling those stories with facts and truth, you know. And Westgate was one perfect example where there was a very gray area, you know, getting into the Westgate, and you're trying to get the facts right. You're trying to get the truth. What has happened here? The gunmen, how many are they? How many people have been killed? How many have survived? How many floors have they taken? What exactly is going on? How's the response from the government, from the military and security agencies? How are the rescue teams working? And you know, that pandemonium and that confusion around the time, it's very difficult for a journalist, you know, to settle down and do a 3 or 4 minute script, putting all these facts together when you can't quantify any of this from the government officials. That was very frustrating because you get a figure from someone telling you, I saw 15 gunmen. Then you are trying to get this to get this information verified. Right. The person you're talking to is not committing themselves to anything. They're not telling you anything. So as a journalist, you're left in that gray area. What you end up doing is you quote the 15 figure, and you also quote the 10 figure and the 4 figure, and you put the story out there.
But let me and I think that is where now, as I say, in any situation like this, behoves the media to have a protocol. Because it's a terrorist attack, and I think in any, you must have a set of principles that this is a very fast evolving story. And it is not your business as a journalist to then exaggerate. I think the first rule of journalism is to verify and ascertain. And I'm saying this, yes. If then you cannot do that,
don't report it.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm only saying be very careful. And I think journalists cannot, under the guise of saying that they must tell the story, therefore that they propagate some falsehoods or untruths. And sometimes, I would say this, one of the best students of journalism and perhaps an author is Philip Knightley, and he said the first casualty of a situation like this is truth. And I'm not saying that journalists should not. I'm only saying journalists need to have a particular protocol that determines in a situation like this.
Right.
Information mining.
Yeah, and information.
He's talking about protocol.
Protocol. I think
the first thing I would want to say about this is that there was total panic, right? And that like the normal news, where there's a lot of gatekeeping in the newsroom, and therefore you know what to give out, this was just reporting from the scene. And most of the journalists that reported from the scene were people that had not even had such a kind of an experience, right? There was no guidelines in terms of what do I say, why do I not say.
Did you have guidelines
right?
on?
So basically,
like he's rightly saying,
like
this was a fast
yes,
situation.
yes.
Yeah.
None of us was
Yes.
ever trained for
Yes.
to cover an event like this one. We normally cover robberies, you know, someone has snatched someone's phone on the road, someone has been killed on a highway. Those are the normal stories that we used to deal with. But here's a situation where we first thought it's a robbery, only to realize this is more than a robbery. It's been going on for hours, and the people coming out and saying, we've seen people look like Al-Shabaab. Then we realized this is a hostage situation, this is a siege going on.
Right.
From that point, we needed certain things to be verified. But the problem was there was no point of contact, especially from government officials. No one was there to verify these facts. Okay, are these terrorists? Are these Al-Shabaab? So we ended up going on air with witness accounts.
And
Yes, yes.
what's wrong with that? As you were saying, I cut you short, but
Yes.
I needed him to come in and say whether or not he felt well prepared. As you were saying, we were
So
not.
the biggest problem then was that in that kind of confusion, journalists were telling their own stories. The thinking of the implication of their stories not even
Were
occur. I don't think they thought about the implication of the story.
What do you mean when you say implication?
Theirs was just preoccupied with this is what is happening in the field, this is what you are saying, and so forth. The issue that live coverage could be aiding terrorists not even occur that particular
Yeah.
moment.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's
And
where-
basically, Mark, this is what I was saying in terms of agenda setting and
Agenda
framing,
setting.
is that whatever that is reported initially then shapes the entire operation, including how police react. Because, I mean, if you look at how 9/11 and Westgate was reported, there was the agenda that was set initially shaped the entire operation, and it perhaps magnified the story than it wouldn't be magnified. The thing is the media is basically the largest tool that a terrorist could use, arguably yes, because one of the things is that they get live information. They play what it is that we call symmetrical power. What it is that they want is that they want recognition, they want attention, they want, you know, they basically want you to accredit them as a genuine organization purporting a genuine good. And they want to dim down the power of who they are fighting, and then you level them, which media is able to do that quite well. So they become relevant, of which it's a force of 4 people, or a force of 10 people, or 20 people, or 100.
Right.
Fighting an entire nation, and therefore they become level.
Speaking about agenda setting, and you had also this complaint about one of the spreads that we had on the Daily Nation, in fact,
Yeah.
and that aspect of it. And you mentioned 9/11 and other attacks in the West. Rarely do you see dead bodies or bloodied bodies. What was your criticism on this one?
But one of the things you've got to understand is that the Western media, and I think a lot of other media institutions have a protocol. In a situation when you have an emergency, when in a situation we have a situation like that, you must be able to be sensitive. And we're not saying you don't show, but the point of the matter is, what is it that you're saying, and are you by mistake perhaps playing into the hands of the terrorists, or are you abating or pushing their agenda? And I think all of us, a lot of journalists were trained, you're told, if you went to an accident scene, the first thing you say, they were people injured, but then you're told, verify with the authorities. Isn't that so? You're told, please go to the police, go to the hospital, but you just don't say it because the witnesses said we saw 200 people. I think our training is very clear. Verify, cross-check, and cross-check again. I think that's a training.
Now,
Harold,
let
yes.
me say something. Well, actually, there was a lot of spontaneity in terms of television coverage.
Yes,
I
it's a live
will
environment.
not forgive a case of usage of photographs or photos in the newspaper when you have time even to get keep and say this is not right. let's not show this.
Okay.
But the newspaper went ahead and used those photos. It was using the People, it was using the Nation, and so forth. So I think there was lack of clear respect of the code of conduct in terms of what was covered in the print media. So for me, as much as we could forgive the issues of what happened in the live coverage, the issues of using of photographs that are bloody and so forth in the print media, for me it was not ethical.
Right. Informing a protocol,
yes,
as a media council,
yes,
how do you help? I'm not saying this is your responsibility,
yes, yes,
but people would expect you to aid the process of forming this protocol. I don't know, in your experience, is this a joint effort that they decide this is a protocol whenever there's...
Yeah.
What's
There
your role?
are two things now. The other thing, of course, that John Gashi mentioned was the issues of safety and security of journalists themselves.
Yes, and he'll talk a bit more about that.
And he spoke about that.
Yes.
And we have gone ahead ourselves and developed now a 10-point protocol and a guide for coverage of those kind of issues. Right? That has been discussed by the media industry. It has been even endorsed by the media owners. And one of the requirements is that the journalist has a right to refuse to go and cover an incident if he feels that it is life-threatening. And that has been signed by the media owners. So that's a step forward, right? And of course now there are other requirements in terms of the safety gear, in terms of the insurance, in terms of the the communication, in terms of the backup from the newsroom, the role of the editor, the role of the the media house, and so forth. Those already have been discussed. Okay. And you're going ahead to see that that media house is developing their own protocol in terms of safety and security, not only of journalists, right, but on how to cover those kind of incidents. And so that we're working towards.
Right, but even as we talk about
yes,
the protocol,
yes,
and my producer is reminding me this,
yes,
as much as yes, we showed the bloodied photos and it makes it look like the international media was all good, but to be honest, when they're playing our story, when they're showing our story, yeah, the BBC's in them, they would have those bloodied pictures.
Let me come into this. I think it's only last week that the National Geographic has been running a series of documentaries, right, on the 9/11. It is only now that they could show pictures of dead Americans being carried away. That is almost 11 years ago. Now, when the BBC, when there was the attack in London, when there was the attack in Madrid, when there was the attack, there have been a lot of terrorist attacks. The BBC, where you work, has a very clear protocol about the kind of pictures, about how they deal with issues of terrorism. And indeed, prior to the agreement in Northern Ireland, the Irish Republican Army was indeed kind of cut off from the British media.
But does this only apply when they're talking about their citizens and their territory? Because when they're showing the events here in Africa,
but you see,
it's almost what you're talking about.
Yes, how it works is, there's synergy between media organizations and the government in the UK, in America. That's why internationally it's easier for them to not capture certain things in a story and not to air certain things, because there's some level of understanding. This is the understanding. You will not show the audience bloody pictures, but will you give us information, tell us what exactly is happening, be truthful about it. It's the flip side locally. Locally you'll be told, don't show these pictures, but you're not giving anything in return. You're not giving any information. So what exactly is happening inside the mall? There's no clarity in the answers that are given. So a journalist ends up looking at that story and saying, well, he said, she said, this is what we saw. And we put it on air.
But Dennis, I'm also talking about the international media portrayal of Kenyan attacks. When they're also portraying it or when they're carrying it, it's not as handled as carefully as they would handle their own territory. Why is that?
I don't have a specific answer for that, because that has always been my question. I'm working for the BBC at the moment, and that's one of the things that we've dealt with. Boko Haram, for example, when the coverage of Boko Haram was happening, the domestic channels will actually, the audience in the domestic channels will see the faces of those girls. But internationally, they were covered. There's a policy within the organization for the local audience. There's nothing much that they can do, whether they see the girls or not, it doesn't matter.
But these are humans.
But exactly, they're humans, but that's their rationale. But when you come to the outside, don't show other people, including Africans, the faces of these girls because you're putting their lives at risk. It was a discussion in the BBC when I was in London. It was a very big discussion because editors were meeting and saying, well, why do we show the faces for the domestic audience and then show, blur their faces for the international audience? And that is still a debate up to this very day.
Dennis, you had a response to
Yeah, I mean, I was really eager to speak. I think one of the things that the international media has realized is that they're not going to play a tool to the terrorists, and therefore they're not going to get exploited for, I mean, giving terrorists any free coverage thereabout to further their cause. As I mentioned earlier, is that one of the biggest, the terrorist is not interested in the victim or the act itself. It's interested in the coverage that they're going to get out of that, and that is the biggest deal for them. So no coverage means they've actually failed. Because to be very honest, if you look at Westgate versus what is happening in the country, I mean, road safety in Kenya kills, 10,000 plus. Westgate was 67, arguably. So I mean, if you look at where the weight is, you understand, the coverage that Westgate got, I mean, if I was Al-Shabaab, I'd be extremely happy that I got free coverage. And I was actually made legitimate. The attention that I was looking for, I got it freehand. But one of the things I want to say is that, I mean, we cannot, we have to be careful in terms of demonizing our own media and glorifying the Western media, is because the Western media is culpable of what I call Athanization. Right. Is that the Athanization, everybody else other than them has to be treated differently. I mean, if you look at them having to drive the perception around, I mean, a few years ago and even now, if you see an Arab or a Somali or anybody Muslim, you basically think those are the terrorists, you understand? So there has been that purporting of Athanization, even including religion. And in Kenya, it was almost sliding to that, whereby you're framing a certain type of people. You're framing religion into it, you understand? And therefore you fall into the trap of Athanization. Right. And we have to be careful to understand that terrorism has no particular religion or no particular face to it.
What Dennis is saying is basically true, but this is not just a Kenyan situation. Globally, all media houses are grappling with this, and there's a struggle of what to tell, what you can't tell. For example, ISIS beheaded 2 journalists. The whole idea is do not show the beheading, though the videos are out and they're accessible on social media. Just show still pictures, but it doesn't stop the idea that people already know someone is on their knees and there's someone holding a very big machete. They're going to be beheaded. Right. It's just stopping that whole motion. Yes. And I'll just quote something here. You remember the Boston Marathon incident when the 2 boys were being chased by the police. The Boston police actually tweeted and said, warning, do not compromise officer safety by broadcasting tactical positions of homes being searched. It's a struggle. How do you deal with terrorism, and how do you ensure you still do the coverage and inform the public that this is what is happening?
As a media council, because we're talking about how much we expose and how much we don't. If you compare this Westgate Mall attack to the 97 attack, the live coverage wasn't there, first of all, locally, and we also didn't have a vibrant social media. When we're looking at the corporate media and social media versus the social media, how do we handle this, and are you looking at modalities of perhaps empowering the corporate mainstream, rather?
Yeah. Of course, in 1987, we had a different scenario. Already, media was not very competitive. Media is now very competitive in Kenya. And the fact that the kind of stories they're telling with a commercial mind behind their mind, in terms of the number of people, the ratings, and so forth. And therefore, it was a little bit different because of vibrancy of media. My media is now more vibrant, it's more free, and so forth. Right. But now, on the front of social media, we have a problem. Because basically, even before we saw the photos on the images on the television, already we had the information, and many had it tweeted and so forth. So that's a problem that we want to grapple with, and we are grappling with. It's not just locally; it's a global problem, and I'm not sure how to comment on that.
You have a response?
How to comment on that?
My response, Mark, here is this: I think that perhaps when you're looking at 1 year later, has the Kenyan media perhaps learned? Has the Kenyan media willing to perhaps set up protocols. Has the Kenyan media, and I'm talking about right across now, have they set up protocols that in the future, because this could happen, and I'm not talking about terrorism, I'm also talking about we have
natural disasters.
Natural disasters.
Right.
We are having issues like this. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm only saying that there must be, it cannot be laissez-faire, that everything goes. I think you needed to be able to pause a little and perhaps determine what is it that you're going to do. And I'm not talking about censorship, you're talking about sensitivity, you're talking about intrusion, you're talking about, what shall I say? Journalists must be very careful that what they do could also exacerbate a situation, and I don't think it is in their business to make. You need to tell the story as it is, but you're also responsible because you needed to bring in a protocol.
Perhaps to borrow from the discipline that you have in international media, and we're wrapping up with this, looking forward how we can equip ourselves. I'll give you a chance to look at how we're formulating the protocol moving forward, and how we can engage with the security forces, Dennis. But Okari, the contrast. You're at BBC. How are you trained?
Well, the first month I joined, I had to go through a series of training, of course, to understand, procedures, like he's saying, protocol, how to approach stories, what you can't air, how to, verify stories from different sources, not just a single source, because they're not in the business of getting ratings. They're in the business, basically, of telling stories, factual and truthful stories. That's the contrast that I also realize is out there, because most of these media organizations are not basically run by the corporate world like we have locally, where you have news as part of the programming. So the faster you get the scoop, the ratings go up, the more money you make. That is also one of the big problems that I think we're facing in the media organizations in the country. The second thing is, when Peketoni attack happened, I wanted to do this story, and I was told, you are clearly not going to go to Lamu, not because I'm incompetent, but because I'd not gone through the hostile environment training. I didn't know what that was. Later I found out
what is that.
What it is basically, you're trained not just emotionally or psychologically, physically. You're trained, if you're going to a situation like Westgate, you need to think of your safety first. The story is not as important as your life. Your life comes first. So as you're approaching Westgate, there are gunmen inside. So what could happen? You could be shot. So I have to wear my flak jacket. I have one already. I have a helmet. I've been trained in first aid. If my cameraman is shot, what's the first thing I need to do? How do I do evacuation? How do I need to notice my environment to look at exit points in case there's trouble, because I need to protect myself and also the cameraman. So those are some of the things that I've been trained. Now I understand better how to approach those stories. It's not a question of getting the first scoop. It's safety first, and then scoop comes second.
Harun Wangi, you're talking about having the media owners sign something to ensure a sort of protocol to ensure the security for the local journalists, and they're better equipped to face these challenges. What are you doing as a media council?
Already we have developed this protocol and the guide,
and it entails being equipped
with all those kind of, but more importantly is safety and security of the journalist himself, as well as the people that they are working with, and more importantly, we have an incident of we have a story of a cameraman who saved a family at the Westgate. That you also need to have knowledge that it's, you're a journalist, but you're also human. That you cannot keep on holding your camera while there's somebody who is dying and you have the ability to help. So we are now rolling out in terms of training the journalist, and in terms of making sure that all the media houses in Kenya have signed that protocol. Already out of 126 media outlets, including radio, we have the protocol signed by 47 media houses. And all the mainstream media have signed on that protocol. But we want to have this protocol as part of the operation manual of the media houses. All right,
I'll have to wind up with this, but Kwame Owino, he's watching and he says you're factually wrong with the 10,000 figure of the roadside killings. But as you respond to that, the fact that we were given security-wise mattresses bringing down the mall, from a security standpoint, that was impossible.
Yeah, it was impossible.
Right.
I think whatever it was, I think the description of the mattresses burning was neither here nor there. But I think the frustration came in from the fact that, and I think this is what the government feels, is that the media, the journalist is an operator, but is an operator for who? You understand? Are you working on the behest of the terrorist, the media house, the public, or the government? Who are you exactly aiding? So therefore, they'll be careful not to give you any type of information that would, and even if you demand for information, they'll give you an information, deal with it.
Right.
You understand? But however, I think there's need for media to break away from this symbiotic relationship between them and terrorism covering, whereby you're not aiding the terrorists, but basically you're aiding to kill this act of terrorism and to submerge it as much as possible, and overplaying, over-sensationalizing, creating new syndromes. As I mentioned earlier, is that we have a new syndrome in Kenya where we're extremely paranoid. I mean, go and burst a balloon in a supermarket, right, and basically everybody's going to duck undercover. So on the issue of road traffic incidents, I think we rank at.
I'll give you Kwame's number to respond to that.
Yeah,
because he wants.
Not a problem.
He says the facts are wrong.
Those facts are very right.
Thank you for your time, gentlemen, and your patience. Besides and despite the technical hitches, thank you for your patience for watching. If you're probably dozing off, thank you for staying on to the last minute. We'll leave you with the eye opener, basically looking at the few moments capturing the Westgate Mall last year, from the international media to the local media, some of the highlights of that moment. My name is Mark Masai. Thank you for watching Press Pass. Good night.